Hi, I'm Jenna Orkin. My guest today has intriguing and unique insight on that little-known territory, the art world. His name is John Bernard Myers, and he's an art dealer who's been intimately involved in the lives of virtually every major American painter of his time, including Larry Rivers and Jackson Pollock. He was also on the inside of that great scandal, the Rothko trial. You can read about his experiences and friends in his book, Tracking the Marvelous. Welcome, John Bernard Myers. Now, up until 1975, you were an art dealer. Does that require more knowledge of art or of dealing?
At the time that I began, which was 1951, there were very few galleries. And many of us really didn't know too much about what would happen to the market, quotes unquote, market. And I think almost all of the dealers at that time were idealistically concerned with showing the art and trying to stay open. And it evolved very slowly, that which we now today call the New York School of Painting and Sculpture, a phrase, by the way, invented by Robert Motherwell. And how would you define that? It was a new phenomena which was not American, but New York School of New York.
Yes.
A non-provincial kind of painting and sculpture, which could be understood in Milano, Tokyo, London, wherever. It did not base itself on regional or nationalistic themes. It tried to find an audience. Well, that's a bad phrase. It tried to say, the artists tried to say what they felt and what they thought and what they could do in relation to painting and sculpture. I think that the dealers had to be very close to the artists at that time and make an extra effort to understand what they were doing. And this also meant a lot of legwork in terms of doing your homework.
Does New York School mean that the subject matter was New York?
Well, a new abstract kind of painting, largely abstract, was occurring. Peggy Guggenheim was the first to really unleash these people, and Betty Parsons. And it was a new kind of abstraction, quite different from Cubism, for example, and it became known as abstract expressionism.
What does that mean? What was this style?
The inner life of the painter, that which he felt, being put on canvas or made into steel or stone, with very good techniques and so forth, but always a revelation of the interior life.
You talk about technique. Do you feel that an abstract artist should be able to draw well?
I think that all artists, whether they're representational or abstract, must be trained.
Now, Betty Parsons herself was an artist.
Yes.
At one time?
Yes, always, till the day she died.
Are dealers ordinarily artists as well?
I would say no, but some of them were. Julian Levy, for instance, was a terrific maker of jewelry and objects. Many of the others, had little hobbies, painting little pictures and doing that. They didn't consider themselves artists, but yes, they were very involved. But I think the main attribute of the best dealers, the bona fide ones, was a rather large cultural background and knowledge of poetry, literature, languages, architecture, and ran galleries as a business, of course, but also because they believed in what they were doing.
Now, you, in one point in your book, said you had no head for business. How could you pull off an art dealership?
I owned the gallery and I was the director. I selected as a person to help me with taxes, billing, insurance, and all that. A friend of mine who worked in the bank called Tibor de Nagy. At the time, he was trying to get citizenship. He had come from Hungary. It was after the invasion of Hungary by the Russians and so on. And he was terribly hard, trying very hard to get a green card. And I thought the best thing to do would call the gallery by his name. And so we did. But the gallery was essentially run by me. He took care of taxes and business and so forth, because I really didn't have much of a head for it.
And did you gain such a head?
No.
Were you primarily in the capacity of an agent? Is that what a dealer is akin to?
Oh, it's much more than that. For one thing, you have to deal with the artists constantly, sort of hold their hands at times, and be enthusiastic and encouraging at all times. Care about their personalities, their health, their well-being. Go to their studios. Keep very close touch with their work. And the next thing a dealer has to do is to try to find ways to make the work which he's showing in his gallery known to the world. And this involves various forms of public relations with many different kinds of people. In my case, I went after the poets and the intellectuals, and became very friendly.
They're not going to buy your paintings. They don't have any money.
I didn't say it in that way. I said to make it known to the world. In other words, the poets can make a very splendid ambiance around your gallery. I would never give a show without inviting every important poet, intellectual in town.
The unacknowledged legislators and PR people.
Well, it's a way, it's a roundabout way, but that also meant that I had very good relations with the press. Always had very good relations with the press. I always got very good write-ups.
What sort of paintings sell well, as opposed to being good art?
Are you talking about really good painting or fashionable painting? Fashionable painting always sells well.
What is fashionable painting?
Whatever happens to seem very easy to understand and very agreeable.
So it cannot be abstract?
No, there are some fashionable abstract painters too.
I didn't know abstract painting was ever easy to understand.
What's so hard about it? It's a picture's a picture.
Is it better to move inventory or to sell one painting that's very expensive, or does it amount to the same difference?
Oh dear, I feel like a department store buyer or something like that.
I think you use the phrase yourself.
Well, I tell you, the thing is that pictures shouldn't stay in the storeroom gathering dust. I think that it's best for all pictures to be moved out into the world. It doesn't do any good to take this very high and mighty attitude that they're too good to sell. I think everything should be moved into the world. And I know that in the case of Larry Rivers, he would always say, I don't care what they pay, just get them out there. And he always sold extremely well.
Did you ever take on an artist whose personality you didn't like?
That's a very delightful question. I haven't liked very many artists personally.
But you always had to wax enthusiastic. You had to hold their hands. Why didn't you like
hold their hands, you know. Well, they're very difficult sometimes.
Give us some examples, if you can.
I think that would be telling tales, don't you?
Well, that's what I'm trying to get you to do. Tell us some tales. That's what you're here for.
Well, no, some of my artists would get into great difficulties, like being no money and getting evacuated from their house, you know, on the sidewalk. So you have to go running and see what you can do with the landlord to get them back in. Another one was growing pot on the windowsill, and somebody reported him to the police.
When was this?
And so we had to, I'm not telling any names.
No, I didn't say who, I said when.
Oh, this was about 1961.
Oh.
And
he was an avant-garde artist. And
he was a very good one, actually, but very messy personal life. Others got into binds with the collectors, and you have to go and straighten that up, try to make everything nice again. So, it isn't always beer and Skittles.
What is the relationship between a dealer and a collector like? Were you antagonistic to them?
I sang for my supper for so many years. Of course I was very agreeable.
No.
I mean, they're the bread and butter. You have to be very nice to collectors.
No, but I'm talking about not how you portrayed yourself, but what you actually felt.
I liked quite a few of my collectors. I had a lot of nice ones back in the 50s and 60s. There was another kind later on that I didn't care for.
How did collectors change later on?
This was a new kind of upward mobile, nouveau riche, that weren't much fun.
Tell us about Miss Frick. Was she an eccentric, rich old lady?
I never met her, but I do have a story about her in which she had bought a Cézanne in 1919. And through the years she was grumbling about it. And 25 years later, she brought it back to Neudler's, I believe, had sold it to her. And she said, I don't like this picture, and I want you to take it back. And they said, well, how much do you want this picture? She said, exactly what I paid for it. But what she paid for it in 1919 was very, very little. The same picture had accumulated to $3-4 million in value.
Was this
but she didn't care.
Was this a form of philanthropy, of supporting,
No,
patronizing the arts?
No, she just was. When very, 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 very rich people are different from the rest of us.
Tell me about it.
Well, you know perfectly well. They even smell different.
I guess I don't.
Well, you've read F. Scott Fitzgerald?
Well, I thought they always said you don't get rich by giving away money. And I
They don't.
They
The rich never
count-
pay taxes, and they never give away money. Everything is a gain in one way or another. I'm talking about the really rich.
Yeah, as opposed to the
Well, what
really,
do you
really
think?
rich.
What do you think is really rich?
Oh.
How much?
Okay, you wanting to meet? I don't know. How many reallys
I
are
don't
we
think
adding?
anybody's really rich unless they have passed 400 million.
Yeah. Oh. 400 million, 200 million doesn't make it?
They're kind of rich, but the real rich, about 65, have more than 400 million.
65,
About 65 families
yes.
have more than 400 million.
And you know them all.
No, I don't, but I knew some.
You also cavorted around with musicians, poets, and artists. What do you think is the basic difference between all these groups of people? Why don't you generalize for us a bit?
Well, I told you before that without money, which I didn't have much of, I couldn't buy large-scale advertisements, and I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that, which today many dealers are very heavily capitalized. I didn't have that, and so I invented other ways. I published poetry from the gallery. I first published Frank O'Hara, John Ashbery, James Schuyler, Barbara Guest, all of them. And then, with a man called Herbert Maches, we organized a thing called the Artists' Theater, which meant a collaboration between poets, painters, composers, and actors. And we did one very avant-garde play after another. We did about 36 altogether over a period of, say, 15 years. It was a subscription theater. And again, it was a way for the artists and the poets to reach out into the world, to make themselves known. If you don't have money, you have to do other things.
What was Jackson Pollock like as a person?
Perfectly wonderful.
And his wife?
Well, she was wonderful too. Today she's very ill, and she's very crippled, and she doesn't go out anymore, and so on. Jackson died in 1956 in a very sad accident.
Tell us about some of your more exotic experiences in this world, or people.
What do you mean by exotic?
Well, artists are supposed to be eccentric and do things of which the stuff of anecdotes.
Well, you get so used to being around artists that everything they do seems perfectly natural and perfectly normal. And I think an awful lot of bourgeois people, middle-class people, are fearfully eccentric in the things they do, their divorces, their terrible treatment of their mothers and their children, and their messy, awful country club lives and so forth. Artists seem to me quite natural and pleasant by comparison.
I don't know how to approach that one. What do you say to somebody who would come into your gallery and say, listen, my 5-year-old kid could do that? Obviously you wouldn't talk to them at all, but how would you
If somebody
educate
said, what?
Well, people do say when they look at some modern paintings,
Yeah.
hey, my 5-year-old kid could do that.
I'd say, I want to meet that kid. Well, I've had a lot of that. I always say, well, I think it's nice that your kid can do that. Somebody once said,
Can I sign him up?
those chimps in Australia painting abstract pictures, and I said, isn't it wonderful the progress that's been made with chimps? Next they'll be reciting Shakespeare.
Let us move on to the Mark Rothko trial. What is your account of what happened?
I feel it's an infinitely sad and tragic event that never should have occurred. It's unique in that there is nothing quite like it in the history of art. There were cases, there was the Bonnard case, which went on for 22 years. There was the Raoul Dufy case, which went on for 10 years. The Rothko case went on for about 5 years. It should have been settled, but circumstances prevented it. And it was it was very sad, very tragic for all concerned.
Let's go into a kind
I'm
of...
trying to take a balanced view, you understand?
Yes, I do. Would you tell us what happened?
Oh, it's so difficult. Kate Rothko, influenced by a certain person who was an advisor for a short while, said that Marlboro was bilking her out of millions and millions of dollars, and she instituted a suit against Marlboro to get her all the money she felt was owed her.
And she won.
She won